think we're going to kick off. Thank you everyone for joining us. I know on a very busy Charleston, especially with so many sessions happening at 3:30 you got to choose from. Thank you for picking our session. We are really excited to be here and all of us be talking about a topic that is, I think, really near and dear to us. We had a little bit of tongue-in-cheek too in naming it, the wait. I don't just become a CEO of a Fortune 500 company. And really that is, I think, about the reality check for graduates. As we've talked and really worked really closely with our group of experts here on the business library side, we really looked at what are some of the essential skills and how do we help graduates as they get ready to enter the workforce. So before we kick into our Q&A, I want to give everyone a chance to introduce themselves. So Corey, why don't we start with you?
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Corey Seaman, Director of Kresge Library Services at the Ross School of Business at the University of Michigan. We are a 19-person library service unit that reports to the Ross School of Business, and we receive our funding from the Ross School, but we work with entrepreneurs and people doing business research throughout the University of Michigan, including the regional campuses in Flint and Dearborn. And I've been there since 2005, which is a long time. So.
Hello, I'm Lauren Ryder, Business and Economics Librarian at Penn State University. I've been there for about 7 years. We also have 7 librarians who work in the business library. We don't just serve the College of Business, we also serve the College of Information Science and Technology, the College of Communications, as well as various kind of related departments, economics, and so on. So, between us all, we serve these different areas, and we work with undergraduates, graduates, faculty, kind of the whole swath of people. And we also ensure that all of our resources are accessible to all Penn State users, which includes every single one of our campuses across the state of Pennsylvania. That's 20-some campuses.
Before I introduce myself, I'll just say, if you were wondering where that last voice came from, it means you have an obstructed view. There's lots of seats right here, if you're interested. My name is Jason Sokoloff. I'm the head of the Foster Business Library at the University of Washington. This is probably similar in service to what my colleagues described. The org chart, though, is a little bit different in that my reporting line and my budget are through the libraries, the central libraries, although the facility is housed within the business school campus.
And my name's Christy Ward. I am the Editorial Director of Business and Management at SAGE. I work a lot on business cases, SAGE Business Cases, a resource that we launched a few years ago. And it's really about building real-world experiences and really joining up the kind of academic foundation, strong academic foundation with practical skills. And so a lot of what we'll be focusing on today are those practical skills. So I want to kick off, I think, with the first question. And here are the speakers. But our first question, let's talk a little bit about the resources and approaches that are needed to support the essential skills for students as they're getting ready to graduate, as they're growing in their academic career. So who would like to start?
I've got the mic. Yeah. So I will say that from my perspective, business students need a balance. They need access to all, maybe like what most librarians consider to be the traditional journal access, periodicals, monographic collections, but also the unique and funky stuff that our business kind of commercial databases is core to the curriculum, that they have these practical skills, this way of doing research in an applied way. So their needs are absolutely not met exclusively by the books and journals.
I'd also add that these business resources and whatnot that we're providing may also be useful across different disciplines. So we have an entrepreneurship program, a minor that is shared by about 9 different colleges at the university. So as a business librarian, we'd be working with engineering students, students in health and arts. These students also need that business expertise, that ability to do business research. And then, so that is just like one of the ways that the library serves these people. Would you?
Yeah.
Just a couple of things. I want to add on something that Dan Hickey from NYU said yesterday. When he pointed out, I think it was someone, well, it was during the session, that 75 to 90% of all startups are unsuccessful, or they stop, or they're purchased or so. I guess the way if they get purchased is successful. One of the things that used to happen, if we go back 10, 15 years, the dream was you go to B school, you get a great job, you move on, your career is set. Right now, a lot of students are actually focused on creating their own job, and it's a really different dynamic, and it creates some information needs that are a little unique. One of the things that we've often done is we have information on the market, so they need information on industry, information on company, information on what's happening. That's very important, but they also need some information, and we'll talk about this later, about some soft skills. And that's where some more general book packages come in handy. And so it's really just a balance. Insofar as the transition to the workplace, it's really tough when you leave an academic institution like Washington, Penn State, or Michigan, and you have access to all of these resources. And then all of a sudden you leave, and it's like the rug is pulled out from under you. And that can be really tricky, but we do have some resources for alumni, but they're really focused for individual research and career support, so that if they decided they really hated their job or so, they hated their career or so, they could easily navigate into a new one.
Sorry, just to add, thinking about those soft skills, and you were mentioning, the ability to fail, really. And so I think that's something also that the library can offer, is kind of a safe place to fail. Think about the research process. You do a search, it doesn't work, you can try it again because you're just using a Sage database and you can just start over. So giving students a kind of like a safe place to fail as they develop these skills that maybe don't reside in any one particular college. Thinking about developing resilience, thinking creatively, communication, in addition to information literacy, data literacy too.
Yeah, and I think Corey mentioned a stat of students and what they're aiming to do, and I know one of the stats we focus on is that over 70% of Gen Z wants to be an entrepreneur when they graduate. So entrepreneurship is a huge focus for business libraries. Let's talk a little bit about the major initiatives to support entrepreneurship specifically and soft skill building.
I'll start, because I have a mic.
Great.
Something that we have at Penn State is this Developing Entrepreneurship Initiative. Over the past several years, we saw more interest at the university level in entrepreneurship, both for students and for the community. We also saw just increased need for this, as well as the kind of complications that the library has in providing access to the data that students need, which we talked about in another session at this conference. And just those licensing issues when we have this complication of academic versus commercial use. So because of all of these challenges, we ended up establishing a new position at Penn State about 3 years ago or so for an entrepreneurship librarian. So this person in this role is able to focus specifically on entrepreneurship, and that means for the business students that need this assistance, as well as students who are in other disciplines, maybe working on that minor, maybe they are an art student who wants to start a business, or whatever it is that they're working on and that they're trying to develop. Our entrepreneurship librarian is able to give them access to the resources, the tools, the strategies that they can use to find the information they need to support that entrepreneurial business plan. And so our current entrepreneurship librarian brought up something kind of interesting recently, in that students who are, seeking out becoming an entrepreneur, they're not necessarily going to become a big deal. They're not going to necessarily be the big-time CEO or turn their small idea into something enormous. A lot of students want to start businesses that will end up being small businesses, and so we need to be able to support them not just, in their efforts to finance something through like VC funding. What are other opportunities for students to gain information about financing?
Yeah, I'll go next. One of the things that's really, so we have, like many programs, we have about 20 different entrepreneurship programs on campus. The main Center for Entrepreneurship is not at the Ross School of Business, it's at the College of Engineering. And so it's sometimes very, very hard to figure out exactly where people are coming from. What we see is a lot of student teams as they pull together and actually identify research in this area. They tend to be spread out, so you'll have technical expertise from engineering, you may have people from hard sciences, but then they also bring in someone from business. It's not only for the business knowledge that they get in the core curriculum, but also because the B school students have access to a certain set of resources that may or may not be useful. So that's an area where we see it's actually creating some good collaboration on campus among students that happen quite organically.
We probably should have done this before, but just so we know who we're talking to, can we just do a quick hands poll? So business librarians in the room? Sage employees in the room? And other? Okay, good. It's just good to know. Like, are we preaching to the choir? Is there a choir? At the University of Washington, again, there's a lot of similar trends happening across the country. But I would say the initiative, if any, is there is no single initiative. There are lots of small things happening, and I think combined with definitely like this entrepreneurship incubation endeavor that's happening centrally at the university in an independent unit, an entrepreneurship center in the business school, entrepreneurship classes being offered maybe out of the business school but to engineering and other students, a master's of entrepreneurship program that doesn't require MBA credentials, anyway, so a whole assortment of things. But then also blended with that are commercialization endeavors, right, which often just kind of get lumped together. Especially when other librarians have to field a reference question, send it to the business librarian. But also what's that seems to happen is business librarians, or at least at the University of Washington, the business library tends to pick up the resources that support those endeavors. So even if it's someone coming from the medical campus looking to commercialize their device, if it's someone from the social sciences engaged in a process of creating a service that has some public good, but there's a commercial aspect to it, it's upon us to provide those resources. So I would say we're feeling the weight of all that is really exciting to see like what resources can fill all those needs, but it absolutely demonstrates that like business seems to be maybe more than any other discipline, the true like interdisciplinary connector, in that there are so many applications from across campus.
It's really great, and I should ask, with all the business librarians here, is there anything you would like to share in supporting entrepreneurship? If not, we can wait till the end too. Just want to make sure we're taking full advantage. Let's move on to, I think as we get into challenges and best practices, because I know many of us come to these sessions so that we can share what are some of the biggest challenges and what are the best practices we can take back to our library, in my case, Sage. So in your library, what do you find are some of the challenges in supporting students and supporting students across disciplines? Take it away.
They want everything. We want to provide everything. We don't have unlimited budget. But you know, even more than that, I mean, that's like an age-old thing. No matter that's not specific to business. But I think, you know, I've been thinking about this a lot. I've been thinking about a lot over the last few days here too. The thing that stands out to me is that it's easy to communicate need or to solicit a statement of need just based on your everyday interactions with students and with faculty, your knowledge of what's happening in the curriculum. What's really hard, I think that what ends up being the biggest challenge is because of sort of the uniqueness, the weirdness, the complicated nature of business sources, it ends up being the library culture and the library organization that often is the biggest barrier. This contract looks ridiculous. It's asking for them to create a username and a password. We don't want to do that to our students. So it's often like this ongoing negotiation, at least with me, where, you know, it's like all I do is like request money to, the money that I've been allocated to spend on something. I don't have to do the contract negotiation. But it's really like helping to help my colleagues in other disciplines who I might tap for a little bit of money to support a new source, or people in collection management who have to negotiate the licenses or the weird acquisition terms, to understand that this is not just something that'd be nice to have. Like our students need this, and it's not just in the business. It's not just like the business school that's causing you this headache. based on what I just described about what's happening university-wide, it's like this constant need to communicate actively, because that's just not the default setting for, I think, for the people who are conducting the transactions for us.
Yeah, and I would say also providing access, as I mentioned, that at my institution we're providing access no matter what your location is, so I can't just buy a resource that's only accessible at my campus. I have to buy it for everyone. And these resources are needed everywhere across the state. If we're talking about entrepreneurship, we have these lunch boxes, business incubators all across the state at our different campuses, and they need these resources too. So if we can, get lucky enough to negotiate access for everyone, and they don't do something like, okay, well, multiply that cost by 22 campuses. That doesn't work. So even if we can get the access, then we also need to be able to provide the support and expertise to colleagues across the state who, maybe aren't used to working with entrepreneurship students or students trying to start businesses, or don't know about the differences between working with a community member trying to start a business and working with a student on a project where we've already licensed that academic use for the product, but we may not have the ability to use it in a commercial way, in a commercial setting. So that could be a challenge, certainly.
And then just to add, I was just jotting down a few notes. One of the things, we have one faculty member who's very adamant that entrepreneurship isn't taking something and adding ranch flavoring. A lot of people will say, I'm an entrepreneur, I opened up a cupcake store. And I think we're at the tail end of the cupcake store. I think they've all opened and 98% of them have closed. But one of the things that's really interesting is that a lot of our people doing work in this area are working in areas where we just don't have any information. There was someone who was looking for information on hand warmers, portable hand warmers. And so you have to sit creatively and think, okay, who's going to care about that field? And where is that going to come from? And that's not something that's really packaged in any resource out there. So it's not the deficit of anyone. No one would sell a report or build a report like that because there's not enough people to necessarily buy it. Occasionally we get lucky, and I'm going to go off script here. So this morning, I'm staying with my mom and I'm walking her dog every morning, and this morning, it's usually dark, and this morning it's just perfect moment, because she, for lack of a more elegant term, pooped, but it was in a place where it was light, so I could see and I could pick it up, and there was one of those garbage cans really close, so it's like, oh my God, this is perfect. This is perfect opportunity. And occasionally when we're doing entrepreneurial research with someone, we get lucky. And that's more, it certainly, it smells better, I guess. But there's so many areas that there's no market report that we really have to struggle. And students may be able to find the people who publish the researcher markets and markets, those resellers, they're really good at putting their terms, their pages up on the top of every search term. And it seems attainable. The reports may be, of marginal value, but that's really the challenge that we find day in, day out is what we need to help students and entrepreneurs is not readily available. So many of the failures take place because they didn't connect with their customer, or they didn't find their market, or maybe they're early. Very few people start businesses with a really bad idea. Most people start with a really good idea, but they just can't find their avenue. And so that's really where we can provide a value. So that is a challenge, but then on those times where we're successful, it is the best opportunity, and we were making really profound connections. And when that gets around, that's how we get the second generation of people coming to us. And success breeds the higher class problem. And so that's where we keep getting, if we weren't able to answer anyone's question, no one would come to the library. And I think all of us in the room, from Vanderbilt, MSU, NYU, etc., we're in UNCG, we're all working in that space to basically be able to help people, and our success is driving more business.
I thought for sure you were going to end with like stepping in poop. So.
No. I've been lucky, I haven't been skunked.
Great. Well, we have a couple more questions, and we're going to then open it up for us to have a larger discussion in our final few minutes. But moving on to assessment and ROI, we do have to take a close look at our resources, and we know that the library, there's a lot of competition for business resources within the library. Also a lot of changing student needs within business. So what advice or approaches would you offer up on addressing changing student needs, and how do you assess your value?
Well, I was thinking something along the lines of thinking about how we're working across disciplines and communicating with our fellow selectors who select in other areas and trying to work together. So recently, another librarian had a request from a student and was like, "Hey, they want this industry report. Should we just buy it?" It's like, hold on, hold on a minute. We have other resources in our collection that can meet those needs. It is challenging, but trying as much as we can to kind of evaluate what we have where there is overlap between our different resources. Maybe there is something we can cut, most likely not. Most likely we want to keep everything we can. So as far as looking at the needs of our user populations, the resources that we have, and looking for the spaces where we need to introduce other resources, or maybe we can make those difficult decisions.
So one of the, I think one of the real challenges is these areas where people are asking us for stuff where we don't have anything. We list on our website about 120 databases that are focused primarily on business. There are things like PsycInfo and PsycLit and Sage Research Methods, not plug for another Sage project, but it's something that PhD students are going to use and faculty are going to use, but the undergrads and MBA students aren't going to. But we have a lot of those resources, and we really want to drive people there. But what we do, the return investment, is even if we cannot find exactly what they want, we try to find a proxy. We try to find something that's similar. And so we've had people ask us for the size of the phone case market, which I'm sure there's a report out there, I've never seen it, and it's really small. And so you sit there and you go, okay, well you can draw inferences based on how many people are buying a phone every year, and then draw, get a sense that way. And that's really where we can make connections that are very positive. We do have an experiential learning program, and I feel very strongly that the rating that the librarians get can depend not on how much work she or he does, but really how successful they are in getting the data that they want. So we've seen people who've worked their tail off get low ratings because the data that they want is not available. And so that's kind of unfortunate, but that's the reality that any organization is going to face if they're going to do the same thing.
I think I feel like a lot of how we assess things is, let's see. So there's of course just like cost per use, right? Like that's like kind of an easy way, except not all of the business publishers have easy ways of capturing or uniform ways of capturing users. So I think a lot of what we do is speculative, right? But it's speculative with, it's not based on nothing. But I think the relationships that Corey described, that's what librarians like. That's our role. Like we're always monitoring the questions that are coming in, and what are we able to answer with the resources that we have? When are we able to offer something that's a reasonable substitute? But then when are we getting questions that are like indicative of some new trend? So I'll give you an example that just happened in the last couple of months. So we've had a Master of Supply Chain Management. That's kind of a new trend, I think, master's programs. That's what business schools have this clever way of like creating new master's programs that don't require the same credentials as getting into an MBA program, so that gets more people can apply. So Master Supply Chain Management has been going for 2 or 3 years now, and I think I just learned from probably one of my peer colleagues at another institution that there's this trade database called Panjiva, as Standard & Poor's sells it. And I just saw it. I said, we need that. I don't know how I knew. I just like, we have this Master Supply Chain Management program. We don't have a lot of other sources that do trade data. So I just kind of guessed that we probably could use this thing and figured out how much it was, went through the whole process. And I think at the end of this, and like we've done other things like this where we just speculate based on whatever little information we're gathering, based on our ability to monitor what's happening in the curriculum, what's happening with the kinds of questions students are asking, what kind of subjects are coming up in business plan competitions, and we try to buy, maybe there's a bit of a lag, but we try to buy according to what we're seeing the trends. And then for assessing, like, was that the right investment, I think it's just coming back to it and just like really reflecting on those trends, looking at whatever usage data we can gather, looking at, how often do we refer to this source, do students seem to like it, getting faculty feedback when we can. So I think it's just ongoing process.
Any questions from the audience? Any areas that you'd like to share for best practices? Yeah.
Are we saving questions for the end?
Yeah, and we're getting close to the end, so.
Maybe we can
Time
save this
now.
for the end then, but on the question of assessment, I'm wondering if any of you have done any direct assessment as far as the curriculum. Like when you go into a classroom and you work closely with students maybe all semester, I'm just wondering if you are aware of other people doing, or if you personally have done any maybe before or after, pre or post kind of assessment on the students, and if you have any thoughts going beyond even that, which is what we're talking about once they leave the school, right? How we might be able to continue to assess them meeting these criteria that we have for them to succeed. We can wait for the end.
This is
You have ended this.
Do you have one? Go for it. Yeah.
So we have a project where we work with kind of first, second year management students, or actually all business students take this course. So we work with all business students where they do a company industry research project as the librarians or research consultants, as we call ourselves in the setting. We help them understand their databases, kind of what they're looking for, and so we are trying to develop those skills early in their career so that they use them throughout their time at the institution and come back to us and see us again. So it's kind of this to teach them something, but also to kind of introduce ourselves to them as well, so they come to see us as kind of partners or friends, or I don't know about friends, but they come to see us at least approachable. And so we have done some assessment of that, but mostly about how it makes the students feel. We found in our research that they do feel more confident after meeting with a research consultant, and that they find us approachable and helpful and all those good things. And so that has been reaffirming that we are making a difference. And something we would like to do is kind of follow those students, check back in later on in their career at Penn State, and if we could somehow check back with them later afterwards, to see kind of how these skills are carrying them into their careers. But I have not figured out how to do that part yet.
One of the real challenges is the set of tools they have access to at school versus the set of tools they have when they move on, when they graduate. We don't do pre and post testing of students when we work with them, but what we do is we're more of a service orientation than like an information literacy. There's nothing in the curriculum, and actually here's the full-time MBA program learning goals. I just happen to have this. There's nothing in here about information. It's dealing with ambiguity is a very important part, and that's something that the students, that becomes a very important issue when the students say, in order to solve this, I need how many contacts in each and every one of our phones? And that's the data point I need. So, well, you're not going to be able to get that. So let's figure out another way to try to come up with that. That's kind of a ridiculous statement, but it shows a lot of what's happening. We've tried to get more assignments in, just so that the first time they actually work, the first time MBAs will be guaranteed to work with a librarian is during the end of their first year, when they're doing the experiential learning, the multidisciplinary action program. And that is intensive, and the information needs can be great. The anecdotal way that we review our impact is by repeat business. And so people always contact us afterwards, hey, you were my math librarian last year, I have this class and they have an assignment. And so there's nothing in our program to teach people to be self-sufficient, but to understand and appreciate the value and importance of information, and that's the role that we provide, and it's sort of the path that we carved for ourselves. And insofar as actually beyond, that's really tricky as they graduate and move on. And if they're local, they can still come in and use walk-in access, but that's not going to be that probable for a lot of our students.
So I guess I'm thinking about your question in the context of the whole body of literature that exists and continues to build on instruction, library instruction, and the impact of those interactions. And I did an article some time ago that I won't allude to because it was like a failed experiment, but they got published. So, but where I tried to do something with like looking at bibliographies where students did something. So it was kind of an interesting endeavor. It didn't really prove anything conclusive. But so I think since being burning myself on that topic, I rely more on like qualitative instead of quantitative. And I think I see more opportunities, not because, as Corey said, there's nothing in the curriculum, there's no metric that's associated with students succeeding in their coursework that really corresponds very well to what we're doing. So I think I see it as more of a, definitely based on like whatever feedback you can get from students or whatever you observe in your interactions with them. But also, if you look at it as like you're providing a service not to students, but you're an educational partner to the faculty as well, it's great to be able to chalk up experiences where you get a faculty member who complains, these students, they're just using Google, what should I do? Well, I have something to offer you. So I think that's how I've just been able to at least document progress and indicate impact.
Just one other thing to add, we work with students and we may highlight a lot of resources. Some of them may never be cited because they look at them and they go, this is the wrong direction. So, but it's useful in helping create the path. But you wouldn't cite everything and just say, well, didn't use it, didn't use it, didn't use it. So it doesn't go in citations, but it's important in the journey. So that's certainly one thing. And again, a lot of it is anecdotal. Are you making a connection? And I think that is super important for a variety of reasons. But for us, we have the opportunity when we have a lot of business resources to work with the faculty to encourage them to ask their students to do more difficult work. That's the thing that's really interesting. If you're going to say, look at the last 5 years of Pepsi and Coke financials, that's easy to get. So that can't be the main topic. You need to be able to actually drive them into using, if back 20 years ago it would have taken longer to do the retrieval, since the retrieval can be very quick, they should have more time for assessment, more time for analysis, and that's actually a real benefit I think that librarians can provide for business students.
We have time for one more question. If anyone has a question? Yeah.
I was wondering, at your institutions, what are you seeing in terms of trends in placements? So at Stern, at NYU, we've seen that consulting is skyrocketing, and for example, the case method of interviewing is becoming increasingly important, not just for consultants, but also for tech. So I was wondering, do you have anything to share about where your students are being placed, and how is that informing collections and services for your
Yeah. We at Michigan, we send a lot of students to McKinsey, Deloitte, A lot of students want to go into consulting. A lot of students go into tech/retail, so Amazon. I think we send more students, graduates to Amazon than any other school, which is given the fact that they're not anywhere close. But we send people to a variety of areas. A lot of it is on that sort of management side, the side of consulting. And my old boss used to say that Michigan, people hire Michigan grads to make their other employees work better together. And so that's sort of the role, because everything is team focused. But more and more students are actually pursuing non-traditional role jobs, and so they're looking at nonprofits, social enterprises, smaller places that aren't interviewing on campus. And so that's an area that we're seeing, but consulting is traditionally, we send a considerable number, and actually, one last thing, it varies. We send more undergrads into finance than MBAs. So the MBAs and the BBAs are really kind of different, and it's very interesting. I can't tell them apart because I'm so old, and I stopped asking because I just make a mistake. And our dean actually looks like he's an MBA student because he's very youthful looking. But that's an area that I've just started to notice, and it does reflect upon the different kinds of resources that they want. But for a lot of people, it's consulting. That's the sort of the gold standard.
I don't think I have the awareness of what Corey does, and probably it's indicative of that I don't report to the business school. I don't stay on top of it as much. But my sense is that it's a mix. The one thing that given entrepreneurship is such a trend, like I get the sense that students are not just going right into corporate jobs the way that maybe they did 10 or 20 years ago. Although there's a lot of corporate presence in Seattle, Amazon, Microsoft, Starbucks. So I know there's a fair amount of people who are getting recruited to do any of those tech sector jobs that just are right there, ready. But I do hear quite a lot about students looking to do something a little different, whether it's something entrepreneurship, something nonprofit. So it's a real mix. The one thing I do notice is students really want to stay in Seattle. I don't know what that is. Like, I'm kind of been a nomad in my career, like moving anywhere, anytime. But students, there's something about Seattle that's like a magnet, and people like to stay there. So I think that's probably more typical of Seattle than I've seen in other institutions where people tend to go somewhere else.
Good. I thank you both for your questions, and I want to thank our panelists today for our session. Our time flew by, so thank you all, and I hope you have a great rest of your Charleston, and thanks for attending our business session.